There is a moment. You know it. It comes late at night, or in the space between the ringing of your phone and the silence that follows when no one calls back. It comes in a crowded room where you are surrounded by faces, yet somehow invisible. And in that moment a question rises from somewhere beneath your ribs, somewhere older than language itself. Am I alone? Sit with that question for just a moment. Don't answer it yet. Just let it exist. Because what if I told you that this ache, this hollow, gnawing sensation you have spent your entire life running from, was never your enemy? What if the very thing you've been medicating with noise, with distraction, with other people's approval, was actually a messenger? A sacred ancient messenger from the deepest part of yourself, knocking on a door you've kept locked for years? What if the most agonizing pain you've ever felt wasn't a curse, but a calling? Breathe that in. Let it settle into your chest, right where the tightness lives. That hollow ache of being left behind, of being unseen, of watching everyone else seem to belong while you stand outside the glass looking in. That ache is not a malfunction. It is a gateway, a sacred gateway to your truest self. And so today we are not going to run from the void. We are going to walk directly into it, together. Because the void, as terrifying as it feels, is the crucible where your sovereign spirit is finally born from the shadows. My name doesn't matter. What matters is what you're about to discover about yourself in the next 30 minutes. So find a quiet place. Let your shoulders drop, let your jaw unclench, and come with me into the depths. Carl Jung once wrote that the shoe that fits one person pinches another, because there is no universal recipe for living. But there was one truth he returned to again and again throughout his long and haunted life. That which we do not bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fate. And nowhere is this more true than in our relationship with loneliness. We are living right now in the most connected era in human history. Billions of devices, billions of messages sent every single hour. And yet somehow, we are the loneliest generations to ever walk this earth. Doesn't that strike you as strange? Doesn't some part of you sense that something is deeply, profoundly wrong with this picture? Here is what I want you to consider. What if this epidemic of loneliness sweeping across the modern world is not a sickness at all, but a symptom of something trying to be born? What if the collective ache so many millions of souls are feeling right now, in this very hour, is not evidence of our disconnection from each other, but evidence of a species being pushed, kicking and screaming toward spiritual maturity? Let that land for a moment, because for thousands of years human beings lived embedded in tribe, in clan, in village. Your identity was given to you. You were the daughter of this family, the son of that lineage, a member of this village, a worshiper of that god. You never had to ask, "Who am I?" because the tribe answered that question for you before you could even speak. But something has shifted. The old structures have dissolved, the tribes have scattered. And now, for the first time in human history, vast numbers of us are being forced to stand alone in the dark and ask that question ourselves. Who am I when no one is watching? Who am I when no one is holding my hand? This is not a curse. Listen closely now, because this is the heart of everything I want you to understand today. This is an initiation. In every ancient culture, in every mystery tradition, the initiate was taken from the community and cast into solitude, into the desert, into the forest, into the cave. Alone in darkness, stripped of every external comfort, every familiar face, every voice that once told them who they were. And it was only there, in that terrifying aloneness, that the old self died and the true self emerged. You are living through that same initiation right now, and nobody prepared you for it. Nobody sat you down and said, one day the world will grow quiet around you, and in that silence you will either shatter or you will awaken. I am telling you now, there is a war being waged inside every lonely heart, and almost no one can see it, because it happens far beneath the surface, in the basement of the psyche, where the ego and the soul do not want the same thing. Let's go there together. Let's walk down those stairs. The ego, that fragile, brilliant architecture of self that you built since childhood, was constructed for one primary purpose: survival through belonging. Your ego learned very early, in ways you don't consciously remember, that being loved meant being safe, and being abandoned meant being annihilated. This isn't metaphorical. To an infant, to a small child, abandonment is death. There is no exaggeration in that sentence. And so your ego, that clever, terrified architect, built an entire identity around one desperate mission: never be left alone again. This is why rejection feels like dying. This is why the silence after a breakup, the empty chair at the holiday table, the friend who stopped texting back, cuts so much deeper than logic would suggest. Your ego is not simply disappointed. Your ego is in a state of primal alarm, screaming an ancient warning through your nervous system. You are unsafe, you are unseen, you will not survive this. But here is the secret your ego does not know, and cannot know, because it was never designed to know it. The soul requires something entirely different than the ego does. Where the ego craves external security, the soul requires internal stillness. Where the ego needs to be witnessed by others to feel real, the soul only becomes real in the witnessing of itself. Read that again in your mind. Let it move through you. The soul only becomes real in the witnessing of itself. This is the great and terrible paradox that Jung spent his entire life circling. He called it individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who you actually are, beneath every mask, beneath every role, beneath every desperate performance you've ever put on for an audience that was never truly watching as closely as you feared. And individuation cannot happen in the crowd. It cannot happen while you are managing everyone else's perception of you. It can only happen in solitude. This is why every prophet was tested in the wilderness. This is why every hero in every myth must at some point leave the village and enter the forest alone. Not because solitude is a punishment, but because solitude is the only laboratory in which the true self can finally be distilled from the false one. So now, I want you to consider your own loneliness differently, not as evidence that you are unworthy of love, not as proof that something is broken in you, but as a summons from the deepest layer of your being, calling you inward, away from the noise, away from the performances, away from every relationship you have ever used as a mirror to avoid looking directly at yourself. Feel that shift happening in your body right now. Notice where you were holding tension a few minutes ago, and notice if it has loosened, even slightly. That is not an accident. That is your nervous system beginning to recognize a truth it has known all along, buried beneath years of conditioning that told you solitude equals danger. It does not. Abandonment, real or perceived, past or present, is not a verdict on your worth. Let me say that with complete clarity, because I need this to reach the part of you that has carried this wound the longest. Abandonment is not a personal failure. It never was. What if every person who left you, every friendship that dissolved, every love that walked away, every family member who could not offer you what you needed was not proof of your unworthiness, but rather the universe's blunt and merciless way of stripping away false dependencies you were never meant to keep? Think of a snake shedding its skin. The old skin does not leave because the snake failed. It leaves because the snake outgrew it. It had become too small, too rigid, too confining for the creature living inside it. Every abandonment you have ever survived was the shedding of a skin that had grown too small for the person you are becoming. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because I know it does not erase the grief. It does not erase the nights you lay awake replaying conversations, searching for the words that might have made them stay. But grief and growth are not enemies. They have always been traveling companions, walking the same road, whether you realized it or not. There is a deeper architecture beneath your pain, one your conscious mind cannot yet see, but one your body already senses, in the way your breath has slowed as you've listened, in the way something in you recognizes truth even before your intellect catches up to it. We are going somewhere important together. We are going into the shadow itself, into the unconscious territory where your abandoned parts still wait for you, still frozen in the moment they were left behind, still hoping that someone, anyone, will finally come back for them. And the truth that will either terrify you or liberate you, depending on how ready you are to hear it, is this: that someone was always meant to be you. That someone was always meant to be you. Let that sentence stand alone for a moment, because I know how strange it sounds. I know that somewhere in you a voice is protesting, saying, but I needed them, I needed my mother to stay, I needed my father to see me, I needed that person to choose me. And that voice is not wrong. That need was real. That need was human. I am not here to tell you the pain of being left was not real. I am here to tell you what that pain was actually pointing toward, underneath the surface, in the language the unconscious speaks when the conscious mind is finally quiet enough to listen. Jung had a word for the parts of us that get exiled in moments of abandonment. He called them complexes, fragments of the psyche that split off from the whole self during moments of overwhelming pain, and then continue to live on, autonomously, in the basement of the unconscious, uninformed by time. This is why a grown adult, successful, articulate, composed on the outside, can be reduced in an instant to the trembling, terrified child they once were, the moment a lover grows distant or a friend goes quiet. That is not weakness. That is a complex being activated. That is a frozen fragment of you, still standing in a doorway that closed decades ago, still waiting. And here is what almost no one tells you, because almost no one has walked deep enough into their own darkness to discover it. You cannot outsource the rescue of that fragment to another person. You have tried. I know you have tried. You have searched for that rescue in relationship after relationship, hoping this partner, this friend, this family member finally repairing the bond might reach back through time and heal what was broken. And it never fully works, does it? There is always a residue, always a hunger that no amount of external love seems to satisfy completely. That is not because love from others is meaningless. It is not. But it is because the deepest wound of abandonment can only be healed by the one presence that was with you in every single moment of your life, the one witness who never actually left, even when you believed you were utterly alone. Yourself. I want you to imagine, just for a moment, closing your eyes later tonight and turning inward, not to escape, not to distract, but to actually meet the parts of yourself that have been waiting in exile. Imagine speaking to the child in you who once stood at a window watching for a car that never came. Imagine saying to that child, "I see you now. I am not leaving. I am the one who finally came back." This is not poetic decoration. This is the literal mechanism of psychological integration that Jung spent his life mapping. The unconscious does not distinguish between an internal reality vividly imagined and an external reality actually lived. When you turn inward with genuine presence, genuine attention, genuine compassion, something in the deep architecture of your mind registers it as real. The exile ends. The fragment returns home. This is what he meant when he wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who your parents needed you to be so their own wounds would stay comfortably hidden. Not who your culture rewarded you for performing. Not who your lovers required in order to stay. Who you actually are, underneath every adaptation, every mask, every strategy you built to avoid the terror of being left again. And this is precisely why the ache of loneliness you feel is not something to be cured, medicated, or distracted away from. It is something to be entered, deliberately, consciously, with your eyes open. Consider for a moment the difference between isolation and solitude, because they are not the same thing, even though your nervous system may currently register them identically. Isolation is what happens when the ego is left without an audience and it experiences that absence as a threat, a wound, a proof of unworthiness. Isolation is loud, even in silence. It is filled with rumination, with replaying, with the mind's desperate attempts to solve an unsolvable equation of why wasn't I enough. Solitude is different. Solitude is what isolation becomes once the ego finally stops screaming and the soul is finally permitted to speak. Solitude is spacious, it has room in it. It is not the absence of connection, it is the presence of self. You have likely spent years, maybe your entire life, running from the first in order to avoid ever discovering the second existed at all. So here is your invitation, and I want you to receive it not as advice, but as a doorway standing open in front of you right now. The next time that hollow ache rises in your chest, the next time silence descends and your mind reaches instinctively for the phone, for the noise, for anything to avoid sitting inside that feeling, I want you to pause. Just for a moment. And instead of running, I want you to turn toward it. Speak to it, silently, the way you would speak to a frightened child standing at your door. What are you trying to show me? What have I been refusing to feel? You will be astonished at what begins to surface once you stop fleeing from your own depths. Because beneath the grief of abandonment lies something else entirely. Something almost no one tells you about. Something Jung himself only fully understood in the darkest years of his own life. After his break with Freud, after he descended, quite literally by his own account, into what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. Beneath the wound of being left lies a forgotten sovereignty. A wholeness that does not require another person's presence to be complete. A self that was never actually broken, only buried, beneath decades of believing that love could only exist if it came from outside of you. This is the treasure hidden in the wound. This is the gold buried beneath the very ground you have spent your whole life trying to avoid walking on. And we are only beginning to uncover it.